Well, thank you all for inviting me here, welcoming me here and my family. It's really nice to actually look around and see faces I recognize from SSIP and the wonderful volunteers that your church sends over. It's such great work, and I know I've been blessed by it, just getting to participate in a small way. But yeah, so thank you again. My name is Ben Eastvold, and I'm the founder of a local nonprofit called Glad Technology. And we reach out to the communities that are displaced or disadvantaged, and I teach technology training skills. So I teach computer coding, computer literacy, web development, software engineering, and with the purpose of reaching out to those who may not otherwise have an opportunity to learn skills like that, or for those that are interested in pivoting from a career that doesn't really have a high ceiling and going into something with lots of other opportunity. But I'll share a little bit more about what I do in a bit, but I wanted to linger first on the passage we read from Leviticus. In Leviticus 19. The passage I'm working with is from the NIV, so the words are a little bit different. But it says, "When a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God." The ancient Hebrews had a radical doctrine of hospitality. It wasn't just treating strangers and foreigners and sojourners that came into their lands with kindness and respect. That was, of course, important, and it says, do not mistreat them. But even further, treating them as if they were one of their own, that they were just as much a part of things as the Hebrews themselves. The ancient Hebrews had such a strong ethnic identity. They were basically grouped in different tribes and clans. And you can even see all throughout Scripture the genealogies, the lists of families that everyone knew who they came from and what chain they were brought from in all of their family line. And this passage here, and there are many others like it in the Scriptures, is really subverting that and enlarging it at the same time. That these carefully tracked family lines are actually then disregarded, and you have these outsiders that are welcomed in as a part. And the privileges and the status that they had as their ethnic identity was now shared with people from the outside. Leviticus says, love them as yourself. Love them as if they were one of your own. Where have we heard these words before? We hear echoes of it in the words of Jesus, where he says the two greatest commandments, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. In the Gospel of Luke, a supposedly wise teacher, expert of the law, follows up with a question, and he says, well, Lord, who are my neighbors? And Jesus then answers with a parable, the parable that most of us know. And as the listeners there were hearing this story of compassion, of the person who was robbed and beaten and left on the side of the road, and then you had the religious leadership of different sorts walking by, noticing and going on and passing, you have one person, a Samaritan, a foreigner, an outsider, is the one who stops, answers the call of the moment, and comes in with love and care and support. At first, when people are listening to this, they're probably identifying, oh, my neighbor is the one who is hurting, who's broken, who's on the side of the road, who I can actually come and care for and even provide out of my own pocket to give the care that's needed. But Jesus turns this message on its head, and he says, who in this story was the good neighbor? And so the listeners are then forced to shift and adjust, and they realize, oh, the neighbor isn't the man on the side of the road. The neighbor is the Samaritan. The neighbor is the outsider. and it is the Samaritan who we must love as ourselves. This is essentially a parable of Leviticus, treating the foreigner as your native born, loving them as we love ourselves. And going back again to Leviticus, what is the justification for this? Why is it that this is being said? God says, love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. The people of Israel knew what it was like to be a small, ethnocentric community that is living in this big, broader culture of many different people groups with many different traditions, many different religions, many different ways of living, and still having to hold fast to who they were and their own identity. In Genesis 12, God promises this blessing to Abraham. He says, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all the peoples on the earth will be blessed through you. And so what we find out is that as Israel is sojourning themselves through Egypt and into the promised land, as they are finding this country of their own, this land that God had given them, they discover that this blessing isn't just for them, but it's a blessing that is meant for the world, for the nations, for everyone. And so when we go back again to this passage in Leviticus, when it says to love them as we love ourselves, because they were sojourners in Egypt, it isn't just a reciprocated kindness. It isn't just, well, when you were traveling through, you were welcomed, and so you were shown kindness, and now it's your turn to show kindness to the others that are traveling through your lands. In actuality, there is this underlying awareness that the blessing is mutual. It's not a one-directional that we are bringing this blessing of hospitality to the other in need. Because just as the Israelites were a blessing from God to the nations were also a blessing from God to the Israelites. There's a mutuality here. It goes both directions in hospitality. Just as you are blessed by showing kindness to us, we are blessed by showing kindness to you. And it's that view of love, a mutual giving and receiving, a discovery of these blessings that we have for one another, that became the foundation of my work today here with GLAD Technology. GLAD is still very new. I started it back in January of this year. And as I said, I reach out to communities here, both locally and globally, and I'll share more about that, to people that are displaced, so thinking of refugees that are coming and resettling here in the area. In fact, you may or may not already know, but Sacramento is one of the biggest resettling areas in the entire country for refugees. It also includes immigrants, people who are coming of their own accord but needing to find a new life, a new way of living here, as well as the disadvantaged, that there are many that just don't have the opportunities that others have, whether it's because of connections and networking, or if it's because of wealth or power, that there are many that are coming from a disadvantaged position and needing the support and the care from others. So my background's in computer science. I graduated with a degree in it. I went on into education. I spent years as a teacher and then an educational administrator, ultimately a high school principal. But it was actually just a few years ago that our lives were turned upside down, and we ended up leaving the community we were at, selling most of our possessions, and hiking ourselves out of the country, and we moved to Kenya. We were participating with a group called One Life Africa, and it was a student sponsorship program. So there were those that were coming out of the slums of Nairobi, like Mathare or Kibera. There were also others that were coming out of really extreme poverty in the rural areas. And these students were all being sponsored, a lot like a small version of like a Compassion International or a World Vision. So we actually moved out, our whole family, including our 2 little kids, and we moved out to this, essentially a retreat center out in rural Kenya, about 3.5 hours outside of Nairobi. And we were hosting these camps for students that were coming in as they were being sponsored through school. They would come to us when they were on their school breaks. So we had high schoolers coming in for week-long camps, and then we had students that were continuing on to university, and we hosted them for 3 months, even more, to have called a gap year program. When we went, we knew there was something going on in our hearts. We were coming out of a very difficult family situation, and we realized that what we wanted was to be a blessing for others, that as there was a place that was being broken in us, we wanted that breaking to be on behalf of and for the world. And as we went, we got to be this loving presence to these young adults that were in this program. What we didn't realize going in was how much they got to be a loving presence to each of us in our lives. That as much as we wanted to serve and love others in the world, we were also discovering our own need for love and for healing. So as we ran this program in Kenya, it was fantastically wonderful. It was so beautiful that we had these students that we were essentially living our lives with, that we were getting to learn together. I was teaching classes. We were eating together. We were playing together. We were living together. All of our lives were shared. It was a very communal way of doing education. So I taught the computer literacy courses. I was basically helping students, some of which had actually never even touched a computer before. In fact, I had one student who was from the Maasai tribe, and some of you may be familiar with that. It's one of the famous ones in Kenya. But he grew up protecting his family's herd of cows from hyenas and lions, and had never actually touched a computer before. And after our class, by the end, he's building out a resume on Google Docs, he's learning how to type, we're collaborating on spreadsheets, even building a website. All of these skills that they were going to be learning as needed as they go into the university system. But as we did, much more than more than like a transactional, like I'm here as the teacher, I'm giving you these skills, I found that the community that we were a part of was such a blessing to me, to our family. And I was getting, as much as I was having this opportunity to minister to them, I found they were ministering to us. That they had found these places of deep joy in their life, even in the face of deep pain, and it was a ministry to me. This is the mutual hospitality that Leviticus speaks of. That just as we go to minister to them, they are in turn bringing that blessing back to us. We ultimately left Kenya because of COVID. We were there in 2019 and 2020. And the pandemic brought everything to a halt. Everything stopped. Our whole program stopped. We didn't know when it was going to even continue, if it ever would. So we ended up leaving, coming back to the United States. And our first question, as we're actually literally in the airport, dreaming, imagining what's next, was how do we do here in the United States, much like what we were doing in Kenya? How do we keep building this community of learning, of hope, of love? And that's how GLAD was born. There's a quote that I came across several years ago by the Presbyterian minister and the author Frederick Buechner. He said, "The place that God calls you is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet." Deep gladness and deep hunger. What a powerful image. And that's how I found my name, Glad Technology. That as I experienced my own deep hunger and I found places of deep gladness, I wanted that to continue for myself and to be able to have that continue for others around me. So GLAD, as I shared, is a program. It's an educational program, but even more than an educational program, I see it as a community. That it's a place where others can come together, yes, to learn skills, yes, to make a change for the better in their career, to be able to provide for their families, but even more to find others that are, in effect, sojourning, that we are sojourners together, not just literally as foreigners coming into the United States, but sojourners in life, that we are all on this journey. How do we find this community as we're participating? How do we be present with one another in a way that brings this life and energy and excitement? And so for me, one of these deep symbols of the mutuality is the sharing of a meal. And it's the same experience that we have in church when we are celebrating the communion or Eucharist together, that we are partaking and eating the body of Christ. And in much the same way that the Eucharist was done in the early church, where you had these meals that were prepared and shared and done in the name of Jesus, that is happening around the table at GLAD Technology. That after we spend 1, 2, even 3 hours, we're coding, we're working with computers, we're programming, we're doing all sorts of really techie stuff. But then at the end, we all come together and we eat a meal together. We have people bringing different types of food. We're eating like Afghan bolani. We're bringing Middle Eastern kebabs, making chili, American chili, just whatever it is. But we're all coming together as one, and we're celebrating this common humanity as we share this meal. And for me, that is, like I said, this deep symbol of mutuality, that we're all here sitting at the table together. No one is over the other, and we're here to celebrate life. So there is a lot going on with GLAD here. We have classes that are coming up. I'm actually hosting a single-day workshop at Bethany Presbyterian Church, where the SSIP does its work. I've actually been at the SSIP here this last week, sitting out in the mornings as people are coming through the food line and sharing with them this opportunity that's there. These are free classes to the community. It's for those that are interested in wanting to learn about this and possibly start a new career. There are boot camps that are coming up where people can learn in an intensive way a lot of these skills so that they could go on and get a job. We also are returning back to Kenya. We're going there this Christmas. We have a friend of ours that have a big piece of property out there that they are really interested in having us come out and teach another one of the classes there. So lots of different opportunities. And I'm also, as I'm sharing all of this with you, it's really exciting to share, and I'm sure it's exciting to hear. But I also wanted to just offer out to you that there are so many ways that you could even be a part. That we are looking for volunteers, that we need not just people who can code and work with computers, but people who are professional mentors, people who have been through whatever industry you've been in, but can help guide people that are seeking jobs for the first time. We need people who can provide meals, the meals that we're all coming together with and celebrating life together, that would be wanting to come in and host, even sit down with us and enjoy it together. And we're looking for financial support as well to keep our programs going. As I mentioned, these are all free for people in need because they're ones that often would not be able to afford a boot camp like this that would be thousands of dollars in the open market. So I will be out here at the end of the service. I'll even spend some time in the fellowship hall, and I'd love to get to know some of you if you want to come and visit and ask more questions. There's so much more that I could share about Kenya, about our classes that we've been doing, what's ahead. And one of the big ones has been, some of you may be familiar with IRC, the International Rescue Committee. They're basically like one of the world's largest organizations in support of immigrants and refugees around the world. And I'm partnering with them here in Sacramento to teach some computer literacy courses. So that's another big thing coming up. But as Leviticus teaches us, radical hospitality isn't just for the other, but it's for us as well. That when we open our doors or set our tables for those in need, it's worth asking, how am I in need? What blessing might I find in those that I serve? What might they have to teach me? For as the writer of Hebrews suggests, the hospitality that we show just might be angels unaware to us. So thank you very much for letting me share and speak, and hopefully I'll get to meet more of you later on today. So thank you.